David Bowie and Iman. The love story that outlived stardom. Some love stories are loud. They burn fast, flash bright, and disappear under the weight of fame. But some love stories do something rarer. They survive, not because the world stops watching, but because the two people inside the story learn how to close the door, turn down the noise, and protect what matters. David Bowie and Iman were not supposed to feel ordinary. He was one of the most transformative artists in modern music, a man who turned reinvention into mythology. She was one of the most striking women in the world, a supermodel, a fashion icon, and later an entrepreneur who changed beauty standards for generations. Their marriage on paper looked like the kind of union tabloids dream about: impossible glamour, impossible beauty, impossible fame. Yet the truth was almost the opposite. Behind the headlines, their love became known for its privacy, its steadiness, and its refusal to become a public performance. And maybe that is what makes their story so unforgettable. Because Iman did not fall in love with David Bowie, she fell in love with David Jones, the man behind the legend. And David Bowie, the shapeshifter who had spent decades becoming everything, finally found the one place where he no longer had to perform at all. This is not just the story of a rock star and a supermodel. This is the story of two people who found home in each other. Chapter 1: Before they met. By the time David Bowie met Iman, he was already more than a musician. He was a cultural force. Born David Robert Jones in 1947, he had built one of the most influential careers in music through constant transformation, from space oddity to Ziggy Stardust, from glam rock prophet to art pop innovator. Reinvention was his language. Mystery was part of his power. Iman, born Zahra Mohammed Abdul Majid in Somalia, had already created a path that was equally extraordinary. She rose to international fame as a model, but she was never simply a face in fashion. She became a symbol of elegance, intelligence, and change in an industry that had long failed to make room for women who looked like her. Over time, she became not only a style icon, but also a voice and a businesswoman with her own lasting legacy. Vogue later reflected that she helped open doors for black models while building a remarkable career of her own. Both had lived entire public lives before they ever saw each other. Both had already been married before. Both understood fame. Both understood how distorted love can become when the whole world believes it has the right to watch. So when they met in 1990, it was not the beginning of two naive dreamers rushing into fantasy. It was the meeting of two adults who had already seen enough to know what illusion costs. And perhaps that is exactly why it mattered. Chapter 2: Love at First Sight for him. They met in 1990 at a dinner party, introduced through Iman's hairdresser. Iman had recently stepped back from modeling and was not looking for a relationship. David, on the other hand, was struck immediately. Later, he described his attraction as instant and overwhelming, saying that from the start he believed she would be his wife. He also recalled being so excited about their first date that he could not sleep. It is such a beautifully human image, isn't it? David Bowie, the man who had walked through fame, art, decadence, and history, suddenly nervous over a date. He invited her for tea. A wonderfully awkward choice, considering Iman later remembered that he did not even drink tea. He drank coffee. But that only makes the moment more charming. It was not smooth. It was not some perfectly polished celebrity seduction. It was a man trying, perhaps a little clumsily, to get closer to the woman who had already unsettled his heart. For Iman, it was different. She was cautious. She later said she was not ready for a relationship and definitely did not want to be involved with someone like him. Not because she disliked him, but because she understood what it meant to become entangled with myth. She did not want the machinery of celebrity. She did not want to fall in love with a persona. And yet David kept showing her who he really was. Not the performer. Not the icon. Not Bowie. Just David. One of the most telling moments came when she arrived at the airport in Los Angeles after traveling from Paris. The doors opened, and there he was, standing with flowers, no security, no theatrical distance, letting himself be seen. Years later, Iman said that was when she knew he was a keeper. He did not care who was watching. His actions spoke louder than words. There is something quietly profound in that scene. Because for two people so visually extraordinary, their real bond did not begin in glamour. It began in sincerity. Chapter 3. I fell in love with David Jones. This may be the line that explains their entire marriage better than anything else. I fell in love with David Jones. I did not fall in love with David Bowie. Iman said it more than once in different interviews, and every time it revealed the center of their relationship. Bowie was a persona, a singer, an entertainer, a global symbol. David Jones was the man she met. The distinction mattered deeply to her. It was the difference between loving an image and loving a human being. And David understood that. Years later, Iman recalled that he never introduced her merely as my wife. He would say, "Meet Iman, my wife." A small detail, perhaps, but in a marriage between two enormous public figures, it meant everything. They did not erase one another. They did not dissolve into one celebrity brand. They remained separate, but together. British Vogue summarized that balance through Iman's own words. They each had their own identity, yet their bond remained deeply unified. That is why their relationship feels so modern even now. It was romantic, yes, but it was also respectful. Not possession, not performance, recognition. She saw the man behind the mask. He honored the woman standing beside him, never beneath his name. For a couple this famous, that kind of equality was not a side note. It was the foundation. Chapter 4. Marriage, but not for the cameras. David proposed in Paris. Then, in 1992, they married first in a private ceremony in Lausanne, Switzerland, on April 24th. Later that year, on June 6th, their union was solemnized again in Florence, Italy. Iman later remembered the rain on their wedding day and recalled being told that rain meant a long, happy marriage. Looking back, that memory feels almost hauntingly beautiful. The world could have expected spectacle, but spectacle was never the point. Yes, they were glamorous. Yes, photographers loved them. Yes, whenever they appeared together, they looked like a vision, elegant, magnetic, impossible not to stare at. But they refused to turn their marriage into content for public consumption. Biography and people both describe how private they were as a couple. They were rarely photographed together in intimate settings. They guarded their home life, kept the press away from their private rituals, and treated their relationship as something to be lived rather than displayed. That kind of privacy was not distance. It was devotion. They were not hiding because they were fragile. They were hiding because they understood value. Some things grow stronger in sunlight. Others grow stronger in shelter. Their marriage needed shelter, and they built it. Chapter 5. The Quiet Domestic Miracle. Perhaps the most moving part of David Bowie and Iman's love story is that after all the global fame, all the acclaim, all the myth-making, what they seemed to treasure most was normal life. In 2000, they welcomed their daughter, Alexandria Lexi. Iman later described that period as one of the happiest times of her life, saying that parenthood drew them even closer and enriched their lives beyond belief. Accounts from the period describe Bowie as measured, sensible, fun, and relaxed with Lexi, while Iman called herself the disciplinarian. People later visited their New York home and found not some surreal palace of ego, but a family that felt deeply grounded. Iman cooked dinner. Lexi went to music and dance lessons. Bowie played music with his daughter. The portrait was almost startling in its softness, one of the most legendary musicians in history at home being a father. Bowie himself praised Iman for keeping business in its place and motherhood at the center of family life. Iman also spoke about cooking every night, calling it therapeutic, while Bowie reportedly made it clear that if he ever had to choose between marriage and career, marriage came first. He had toured the world, changed the shape of popular music, and inhabited multiple creative lives. But in this phase, home was not a retreat from reality. It was reality. That may be the most radical detail of all. For David Bowie, domestic life was not the end of adventure. It was the place where performance stopped and meaning began. And for Iman, who had spent decades under the flash of cameras, love was not proven in grand declarations for strangers. It was proven in routines, in dinner, in school runs, in laughter, in the ability to live beautifully without needing to be seen. Chapter 6. why their marriage endured. Celebrity marriages are often discussed like accidents waiting to happen. Too much pressure, too much ego, too many eyes. But David and Iman seem to understand a secret many couples never do. Love survives best when it is protected from unnecessary witnesses. In interviews, Iman described Bowie as someone who did not fight in the same loud way she did. He is English, she joked, so he just stays quiet, while she called herself the screamer. Then she added the line that says so much about their chemistry. He always made her laugh. It was like cabaret, she said. Even after all those years, she still fancied him, totally. She also called him a gentle soul, linking her attraction to the kind of gentlemanly character she had admired in her own father. There is something wonderfully vivid in that image. Not a perfect couple, not a silent fairy tale, but two distinct temperaments that somehow fit. She brought fire. He brought calm. She brought force. He brought wit. And between them, laughter. They even avoided public displays that would invite speculation. Iman once explained that they never went out for big public Valentine's dinners because people would watch every gesture, every glance, every silence. They did not want their intimacy turned into a spectator sport. Even when traveling, they developed ways to move quietly enough to remain almost anonymous. That takes effort. And effort is one of the least glamorous but most powerful forms of love. Their marriage endured not because they were legendary people. It endured because they kept choosing ordinary discipline inside extraordinary lives. Chapter 7: Loss and a Love That Did Not End. Then came the moment the public never saw coming. David Bowie died on January 10, 2016, at age 69 from liver cancer. The shock was global. Even many close collaborators reportedly had not known the extent of his illness. For the world, it felt like losing an icon. For Iman, it was something far more intimate and far more devastating, the loss of her husband. And yet, even in grief, she remained true to the same principle that had defined their marriage: privacy. Over time, she did speak about him, but always in a way that preserved the sacredness of what they had. In Vogue, she said his absence was ever present, not as though he had simply left. In British Vogue, she rejected the phrase late husband, saying, "He's not my late husband. He is my husband." That choice of language tells you everything. For her, love had not been erased by death. It had only changed form. She later said she would never remarry. Not as performance, not as dramatic symbolism, but as truth. The bond was still alive within her. Biography records her saying plainly that he would always be her husband. And that may be the final reason their story continues to move people. Because it does not end at the wedding. It does not end at parenthood. It does not even end at loss. It endures in memory, in language, in loyalty. Some love stories are measured by how long they last in public. This one is measured by how deeply it remained rooted in private. Chapter 8: The Meaning of David and Iman. David Bowie and Iman were dazzling together. That part is obvious. But beauty alone does not explain why people still speak of them with such tenderness. What made them unforgettable was the contrast. They looked like fantasy. They lived like a partnership. He was one of the great architects of self-invention. She was one of the great embodiments of elegance and self-possession. Together, they could have become a spectacle. Instead, they became a marriage. A real one. With routines. With jokes. With a daughter. With boundaries. With respect. With identity. With a fierce understanding that love does not become more real because more people can see it. In an era that increasingly confuses exposure with intimacy, their relationship feels almost revolutionary. They kept the essential things off stage. And maybe that is why their love still glows with such unusual dignity. Because the world saw the image. But they protected the life. David Bowie spent his life becoming legends. Ziggy Stardust, the Thin White Duke, the man from the stars, the artist who changed shape whenever the world thought it had finally understood him. But somewhere beyond all of that, beyond the costumes and mythology and the genius, there was simply David Jones, a man who met Iman at a dinner party, asked her to tea, showed up at an airport with flowers, built a home, loved his daughter, and found the kind of love that did not need applause. And Iman, who could have spent her life being admired from a distance, found not just a superstar, but a gentle soul. A man she could laugh with. A man she could protect and be protected by. A man whose name, to her, never became past tense. Their story reminds us that the greatest love is not always the loudest. Sometimes the greatest love story is the one that survives fame, the one that survives time, the one that survives even death. And in that sense, David Bowie and Iman did something extraordinary. They turned love into a private art. And somehow, by keeping it so carefully to themselves, they gave the rest of the world something unforgettable.